I look at success in different ways. Absolutely. If you talk about bottom line revenue growth year on year, strong double digit growth, right? Rolling last 12 months, that's been undeniable. So we've seen that come down from whether it's expansion, renewals. Renewals are really low, single digit, under 5%,
Sorry, the
and
renewal is low or the churn?
sorry, the churn rate is really low. Sorry, good point.
Yep.
Revenue growth is double G, as I said. So that's kind of the bottom line. But I think the other drivers of what we're seeing are the qualitative ones.
Buyer-led growth.
Hello and welcome back to the Buyer-led Growth Show. I'm Andrew Hatfield, your host, CEO and founder of Deep Star Strategic. We help tech and SaaS companies in the B2B space adopt buyer-led growth so that they can overcome challenges while minimizing wasted spend. Today, we are joined by the CMO of Squiz, a bit of an Australian success story. Welcome, Mei Koon. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks. It's great to be here, and I hope this is going to be a valuable conversation.
Well, from the discussion we're having just before, I'm really interested. It's something that we see quite a bit, so I'm really interested to dive into some of the things that you've been doing at Squiz. But first, what's Squiz? What do you guys do for our audience?
So we're essentially a composable digital experience platform, kind of also known as a DXP. And I didn't know what this was until I joined because it's relatively new as a category. But we have 9 core capabilities on the platform. The content management, integration, site search, personalization, optimization, etc. Now, with these capabilities, what we do is we help complex service-driven organizations with lean digital marketing and dev teams to really build, manage, and optimize multi-channel experiences. So think multiple sites and apps and portals, intranets, etc. And Squiz makes it easier for these customers to manage all this complexity by enabling these customers to orchestrate the entire network of digital experiences, cutting across into how does that all work with social and email and video and chat so that they can offer one consistent, more efficient customer journey as a brand.
Well, we all know that marketing is not getting any easier. So anything that helps that sounds good. So what would be your ideal client? Who can you really help the most?
So that's a great question. So we specifically focus on sectors that are very information heavy, that are service led. So don't think e-commerce, not retail. These are think about higher education, think about financial services, utilities, healthcare, government. Those are some of those sectors where there's a lot of complexity. There's very service driven. There's very lean teams, but they serve a large population, and they were quite content heavy.
Excellent. So I can think of a couple of people off the top of my head that would really fit. But I look at Squiz and I see that, and even as you've pointed out, it's quite a broad offering. So
Yes.
That doesn't happen overnight. But I know that you've really been driving some, bringing things really focused. So what was your first project when you came on board? And what was kind of the history? Give us the 30-second synopsis.
So I came on board in early 2022 at a time when, Squiz is a 25-year-old company that is now global, the US, UK, Europe and Australia, New Zealand. But we started off as a web content management company. We then evolved into offering as well enterprise site search, which is a search tool that crawls content and sources across your own content sources. And then we also went into integrations and data storage, etc. So we had evolved as a company over the last 10 years, more specifically over the last 25. And we had come to a point where we needed to redefine our identity and our point of view to stay relevant in the market, depending on where it was going, especially post-COVID. So I was brought in to kind of help get that clarity for us in terms of internally, but also externally to the market.
So that's quite a bit. How did Squiz get to that point? Was it Obviously, you've built some stuff, but was there a number of acquisitions that led to this?
Yeah, so we started off, as I said, in web content management with the mission that we wanted to democratize the ability to build digital experiences online, starting with the web. Then we then worked on what is really the problem that we're trying to solve. Information discovery within the sites started to become a bigger and bigger deal, and it was something that, particularly in the sectors that we serve, there's a lot of content to trawl through, and we know online experiences, you need as few clicks as possible to get to the end goal. So then we acquired the technology around site search, enterprise search within the context of what you can control versus the Googles out there, as an example, which trawls the entire world of content. We acquired that, and then we discovered, okay, then our customers need to be able to crawl that content from across different systems and sources that they might have: your CRM, your information databases, customer data platforms, those types of things. So then we moved into, okay, we need an integration platform to make that a lot easier, faster, secure, and manageable. And then there was then a relation to that. If you've got all this information and you're trying to make it all work for a single digital experience, you also need to be able to store all that data and content. So that's how we went into creating that the content storage kind of capability. Where that ended up was we started to have four kind of relatively standalone products that we were marketing as a DXP platform. But we sold them as four individual products, even though we marketed them as one platform. So there was started to be a little bit of confusion between the customer not being exactly sure about what we did, staff not exactly knowing what to say about what we did, as we were in the midst of unpacking and repackaging it up. And especially after the pandemic and a break from real customer and market engagement for about 18 months, we really had to reintroduce ourselves, as well as then to customers and the market.
So you mentioned the COVID times. Was the realization during COVID, or was it like after that period? Because there's a lot of like online and digital marketing at that point, a lot of spending, really low interest rates, B2B tech just kind of like took off like a rocket ship. Where did you see this kind of inflection point? Like during that, or was it exposed in the tail end after the period of ZIRP has kind of died?
Well, I would say a number of things happened. You probably kind of gone one or two ways over that pandemic period, right? Like there were a lot of companies that just stayed still. They were almost kind of like, we don't know what to do next.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going to happen in the market, so we're not going to do anything. So that's a large part of the market, I would say. So over that pandemic period, especially in the first 12 months, I would say there was like, sit still, don't do anything. The probably small early adopter innovator group were thinking about this as an opportunity. They were almost forced into, you still got to serve your customers and you got to figure out a different way of doing it. And they were the ones that had to be pushed into experimentation, had to be pushed into, well, we've got to do something because our customers demand us to service them differently online. What do we do now? How do we experiment? And that probably led to a lot of frantic, chaotic kind of work around the digital experiences that after COVID, they had the opportunity to go, okay, now this is a little bit messy. We did things in the rush. Now we've got to figure out how we actually govern and manage this entire kind of Frankenstack, sometimes we call it,
Yeah.
because we were pushed into something that we didn't have really a lot of time to think about, but we just had to do.
Okay. And obviously there were some challenges that came out of COVID in general and the change in the economic space and even it seems so simple, but the cash rate, like the cost of money has changed dramatically.
Yep.
You mentioned like you had two kind of ideal clients. One who's like, I want to sit back and wait, I'm not really sure, and then the others that have really barreled ahead. What was that point where you realize that, okay, we've got all this great tech, and we say that it's all integrated, but we don't execute it. Like, what was the point that kind of like was that light bulb, and what was the discussion like behind closed doors that was like, hey, this is a problem, we should do something?
I think Squiz has always been kind of at the forefront of looking at what's coming next and how do we actually build a product and the solution that helps customers meet what's coming up next. I think the real COVID was a good opportunity for us to actually see that happen in a forced way. Because sometimes, as I said, companies can
It's a
choose to
pressure cooker.
just, yeah, companies can choose not to do anything, right? It becomes an option like I can go ahead and do something or I can just sit still. Status quo is the biggest kind of barrier to change because it's comfortable and it's safe.
Yep.
And I think COVID was the first time that it actually forced everybody to do something or make a decision. What that led to was our review of our product roadmap and really how do we not build a product or a solution just for the next 2 years, right? The thing that we saw consistently is waves of change are going to come faster and faster, right? COVID was a kickoff that sparked off an entire stream of digital innovation because the opportunity was there. Then you had, the metaverse, and then you now have AI. Like we could see that the rate of change was continually increasing, and every new development or disruption was going to accelerate the next phase. So what we were trying to do is we're trying to say, all right, the product roadmap needs to build for uncertainty like that, assuming that cycles of change will come shorter and shorter, almost becoming continuous. How do we build a product that allows organizations to capitalize on new trends and technology wherever it may come from, right? We're humble enough to know that we're not going to develop every new innovation that's going to come their way. We need to develop something that allows them to respond to customer needs really quickly by capitalizing on any new innovation out there, whether it's from us or a third party, but be able to make sure that whatever they pull through as a best of need tool that they need at the time to capitalize and deliver on those new needs is something that can be governed and something that can be secured and something that is efficient for them in terms of ROI, spend, ease of use, and being able to continually adapt that without risking big change projects that disrupt, that cost a lot of money, that have to retrain staff, that almost kind of stop your BAU in order for 6 to 12 months to be able to implement something like that. That whole way of working is the old world, and we knew that we had to change our product roadmap and where we were going to be able to reflect this in our product moving forward for customer needs.
Yeah, look, I can't agree more that BAU always gets in the way. It always takes priority over new projects, no matter what you do, and you've got this resource problem. But I do love this. Let's have certainty about uncertainty. Like we know that change is a constant, and there's big changes that have been happening, globally. So, okay, so you've spoken about a little bit of the history and how you got there. So, was this a recognition that you had internally, or was it really driven by like your buyers and the market that like, hey, I love you guys, but I really want these things to all be together and just make it easier for me? Like, what really kicked that off?
Well, I would say we knew we had to review whether we were still on track, especially at the tail end of the pandemic. Now, what sparked our real pivot was we needed to understand what our buyers actually needed. Like we were making guesses, and that kind of led to a lot of the customer research that we embarked on when I first got there. That was the real trigger and the spark for us to actually make an informed decision about what we do next.
So I can't speak highly enough of first party buyer research. That said, I have seen a lot of cases where research has been a project on its own, right? Like it's been the point, and they've gone, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, and you get this, consultants report at the end with lots of pretty graphs. Walk me through, like, what was it that Like, what was the process of identifying what research you needed, and what was the insight that you wanted, and then how did you conduct that research?
So I think I had just come on board. My product marketing leader, Leonie, had also come on board. She was kind of my buddy. We started almost on the same day. So we were brand new to the organization, which was almost kind of a good excuse to just go, oh, we don't know anything.
Great
let's uh,
excuse.
let's ask some questions. And I think uh, knowing where to start was probably the biggest challenge. Something as big and as fundamental as what is our reason to exist and how do we actually drive our product roadmap to deliver on what customer needs are. What are they? Like, so where to start was always the hardest first step. And we almost fell into that comfort of process, right? Which is what you mentioned about,
Yeah.
the things that you're taught to do is go hire an external expert agency, brief in this, 60 question survey that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars and get that statistical um, validation at volume, or and hopefully you'll know 12 months from now what to do. Now, we decided not to do that because frankly we didn't have the budget and we didn't have the time. So what we did is we said, okay, let's start internally first because we need to bring people along on the journey. We're kind of outsiders coming in. So we said, okay, what do we want to know? We want to know about our customers, like brand new. We wanted to know what their current needs were and how well we were meeting them. We initially started with kind of 5 groups of cross-functional teams across the organization, people who work with our customers every day, and help us understand what we believe the market needs, what our customers telling us, and what our proposition is to them. Then we
And
map this all out.
sorry, were they in sales or customer success or product?
They
Like, where did
were
they
they
fit?
were actually across the board. So they were sales, customer success. They were account managers. They were product and engineering teams.
So real coverage.
Absolutely, absolutely, because we all kind of touch customers in different ways. So we were able to map this on a kind of 2 by 2. This gave us a view of what we believed were our target markets, like our ideal customer profile, what their needs were, and how well we believed we met them. So this was kind of part of our strategy. We wanted to do an internal versus external perception because perception tends to be reality, right? So
Yes.
we played this back to our leadership. This is what our teams believe. And then we wanted to then say, okay, do you agree? Do you align broadly? They said yes. Okay, let's now go and talk to our customers. So as I mentioned, we kind of discarded the whole big research consultancy idea. And we said, okay, let's just start booking some meetings with customers around the world. We started with 2 that week and then 5 the next, and we just kept building so on and so forth. And in 2 months, we spoke to over 50 customers at least for an hour, one to one.
That's awesome. That's a
And
great run rate.
yeah, and because we were kind of really focused on it, and we also did testing with prospect user groups, right? Like using platforms like user testing in winter. And finally, we also did make sure that we touched base with industry analysts like Gartner and Forrester, etc., to get a sense of the industry direction and the kind of bio research that they did on scale. And this gave us a lot of insight, which surprisingly was very consistent, and actually made our pivot on our proposition an easy one to action.
So that's interesting. So just going back, you did the internal perception, and I agree. Like, perception is reality, whether
Yeah.
it's right or not. It is what it is. And then you presented to leadership. How was that received, and was their thinking in line with the rest of the internal viewpoints?
Yeah, I think when you do things like navel gazing, which is essentially what you do as an internal exercise, I think you can go deeper than you expect. There was consistency internally for sure. But I think we probably went, sometimes you think vision, trend, way out there, this is the future, this is the innovation that we need to seek, etc. The real interesting finding that we had was how that wasn't a concern to the
Okay.
customer base and the prospects that we were talking about. Um,
So
and,
there was a difference, right? Because that's the next question, right? Of
yeah.
you had this internal viewpoint and then this consistent feedback from buyers and customers. How aligned or divergent was that?
Yeah, so basically what we found, which was fascinating, right? What we found was supremely clear. Like there's what we call a digital aspiration gap. So, this is just the gap that exists between, what you're promised that digital can do for you, which is, you look at any site, maximize your potential, seamless experiences, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, and it's the gap between that mountaintop and the reality of execution, which is the bottom, the valley of that, mountain.
Yep.
Um, Bringing it back to our target profile, typically lots of sites, microsites, lots of database systems channels to manage small teams. The organizations that we spoke to, that they said that, look, we find that building and managing these experiences, it's just too slow. You mentioned it earlier. It takes 6 to 12 months to even decide to change a content management system or to update your site. It becomes this project that almost kind of consumes majority of the team for months on end and the budget that you're going to spend for that time. By the time you actually deliver it, it's probably irrelevant to the problems that you were trying to solve 18 months ago when you were planning it,
Yep.
right? When you
Massive
actually build
problem
it
in
then,
tech.
yeah, right? And then when you actually build it, you become too reliant on developer resources. Like, I need to change this or I need to do that. Wait, it's in the backlog. I've got a lot of other stuff to do. Just punch it in, put a ticket in, and then we'll see when we get time to focus on that.
It might get groomed, right? You might see it one day.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. It's we'll deal with it when something's broken, and we'll find the time. And then separate to that, then you also say, okay, you've integrated with lots of these different systems that you need to kind of create one experience, but then it's now disjointed. Now the left hand isn't talking to the right hand, and the customers are feeling all the pain. And then it leads to security risks because you've got these fragile point-to-point integrations that kind of you have to manage. Your teams are not experts at managing integrations. If something breaks in one of the 100, you got to figure out which of the 100 broke.
Yep.
So all that just becomes just too hard. They're not thinking about what's the next best thing since sliced bread. They've got problems right now. And the biggest thing that we found was that this actually created this fear of change. Digital is an opportunity. Digital experiences are the way of the future, but everyone was treating it like, took me this long to put something out there, $500,000 spent, millions of dollars spent, took me 12 to 18 months. I don't want to mess with that.
Yep.
I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to risk my reputation. A lot of the leaders talked about there's a risk to my job and my reputation.
Absolutely. This is why,
right?
I've put some stats out about this recently, but, most B2B deals end in no decision, like over 60%. And of those 40% that actually buy something, most of the time it's what they shortlist from a category leader at the beginning. But consistently the feedback is, I don't want to take the risk because if this goes wrong, it's me on the line. If it goes well,
Absolutely.
the company benefits and I might get a pat on the back. So the personal risk is huge.
Absolutely. And I think, that was the real aha moment for us around why that the composability thing in our DXP is the biggest thing, which is just think about it like Lego blocks, right? Like you can use whatever you like within our platform that you need. You can add in, they're built like modular Lego blocks, and we work with other third-party tools that also operate like Lego blocks that work on our platform, right? So you can chop and change, because the real key thing here is that if the rate of change is only going to increase, and I think Accenture's Pulse Index showed it increased 183% in the last 4 years, and it's going to get faster in this AI environment, right, this year. Like, if change is continuous and accelerating, why do we still treat digital experience management like a project, right? It just doesn't make any sense. And it's these kind of three key things that we talked about that you need to design for that adaptability and flexibility. You need to not fear change, but you need to be able to embrace it, and you need to be able to make small incremental moves, not big behemoth all-in-one rip and replaces that kind of scare people from doing anything, right? So
It's too hard, right? Like as we were saying, not just the people risk of like, hey, if this goes wrong, it's my neck, but there's
yeah.
so many people, right, that you need to touch, and as you mentioned, like so many integration points. Like it's too hard. And I don't know, I've worked for a lot of enterprises, I've worked for a number of startups, and it's not just an internal thing about being nimble and agile. Enterprises want that too. Like this is the whole thing between agile and DevOps versus waterfall, right? That
Yeah.
we talk about that for product development, but not third-party integration and implementation.
Yes.
Why?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, that's the thing that we found, right? If you just kind of broadly try to categorize the options that any of your listeners would have when you're thinking about, tech and tools that kind of go into your digital experience, you either got the big monolith all-in-ones that cost the star and the moon, but, are great if you're like a Fortune 500 type company with the resources and the budget and the time. But that kind of locks you into their roadmap because they're quite rigid within that platform, right? Like you use what they give you,
Yeah.
and they don't like to play nice with things outside of that. On the flip side, the SMEs, the startups, etc., have created this world of really easy PLG led tech and tools that you can just punch in with the credit card, use with the free trial, and just start using straight away.
And get value
But
straight away.
exactly.
Yeah.
But what you then need to do is you then need to you almost build your own product company, right? Because you've got 20, 30, 40 tools that you've kind of brought together to try to make work together. And then that comes into now I got to connect all the dots and make sure that they're all speaking to each other.
Yeah.
And that's okay if you've got kind of a limited use case and requirements. But the larger that becomes, that ecosystem, the more complicated it gets to manage, and security becomes a problem. So I think what we're finding in the market now is that you shouldn't have to trade that off. Like you shouldn't say, hey, I want the governance and the ease and the management of everything in one place, but I don't have flexibility, or I have all that flexibility, but I can't pull this whole thing together. Like you shouldn't be forced to compromise. That's kind of like the old world of doing things. So that's why we found out that, customers want the best of all worlds. They don't want to have to trade
Absolutely.
anything off, right?
Yes.
They want
And
it to work like one solution.
yeah, look, I agree. Like when I was at Red Hat many years ago, I built the automation business for Ansible, and exactly what you're saying there, that the big problem with a lot of these enterprise tech products is I can't get any value until I've done everything.
Yeah,
And that's just too
right.
hard. So
That's right.
certainly in that automation space, right? So it sounds like you're doing something similar where it's like, hey, don't rip and replace everything. Just go fix this problem, and then go fix
Yes.
this problem. And it's kind of taking that, like there's been a lot of talk about the painkiller versus vitamin lately.
Yeah, I like that.
Right. And so, painkiller, like I want loss aversion, right? But, or the avoidance of pain rather. The vitamin's nice to have. I would kind of classify the outcome of what you guys deliver as top line revenue growth. Like it's driving new business,
Yep.
but it's balanced by all the challenges and difficulties internally. So if we can go and say, or you can say to your businesses and clients about, look, just go and fix this one problem and then fix the next problem. Hey, all of a sudden, it's Squiz everywhere.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right around that. I mean, a lot of what we're trying to, like, we have a professional services consulting, creative, and development capability within Squiz, which makes us unique as a platform because we're actually helping customers implement the solution we sell to them, right, within their organizations. And that gives us a real lens around, we don't want to be the ones that sell you the mountaintop. And then
Yeah.
the moment we sell it, we say, thanks very much. Third party consultant helps you implement it and we're done. I think we really, every day, we feel the pain of change management and ongoing sustainability of that independence of that organization to run their own thing. Like, we try not to tell them, like, don't eat the elephant. Like, that is out,
It
right? Because
really is.
to your point, like, it doesn't work anymore because pretty much if you look at the way people move through jobs, the person that bought the tech and planned for it, by the time you have to implement it, is gone. And
Which,
somebody else has to live with
which is
that
so
pain.
true, right? So you touched on some of the benefits of PLG and fast adoption. But then you're saying that while we're still taking that approach, we still have professional services. So how do you combine the two, and what was really the impetus for that? And how close are they to customer success? Like, are they a whole other like revenue generating team, or are they integrated with onboarding and activation?
So we don't treat that like customer success, although the thing that we have started doing since COVID is that we have what we call deep dives and customer success plans that we do with our customers. And we don't charge them for that, right? A key insight that we saw around the barriers to digital experience, innovation, and progress is a lot of the time, as you said, people are doing the doing, and they don't have the time or the headspace to think about what's next, or they may have a north star, but they don't know how to get there. What's the 3 month, 6 month, 9 month, 12 month, right? And that again becomes that status quo kind of weight that gets put on them to go, I don't even have time to think about that. It becomes something I put on a page in a plan and I present to the executive, and then I just get on with day to day.
Yep.
So our professional services capability, particularly in that consulting and development space, is that we can actually be practical around, we know what it takes to actually build, optimize, pivot, change. Let's help you understand what your North Stars are. And then we will kind of work out with you, what is the short term, mid term, long term plan to get there, help you bring the rest of the organization on that journey. That's the other challenge that we found. There's one or two team members that are trying to drive something as a silo across the entire organization. Then you don't get budget, then you don't get buy-in, then you don't get actually operational support to make it happen. So that's that process that we take around helping them get from A to Z and bringing the entire customers stakeholder group on that journey.
I think that's an excellent and often overlooked point, that we talk about the buying committee and getting buy-in and a champion. That doesn't end at procurement and signing the contract, right? Like, okay, that was hard, but now the hard work starts
The
of
real
actually
hard work starts.
getting it implemented.
Absolutely, you're spot on that. And I think the real aha moment for us was very much, you would get to the point where they were happy, they wanted to explore the solution, and then they go, but now we've got to go back internally and figure out how we're going to make it work across our strategy. And then it almost goes black. It's just because they don't have time and they don't have the support to do that. So yeah, that's been pretty important.
And so that services and onboarding process, is that, because you mentioned the customer's North Star, is that about helping execute their plans using your platform, or is it just around implementation and like technical execution?
So we do a couple of things. So we have the teams that are just there to help them execute, right? Like, you bought the platform, let's just make sure we roll it out. Your teams are trained on it. You're able to kind of get it up and running super fast, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the self-sustainability bit. The what I was talking about around success plans and the deep dives is kind of an ongoing thing. So we're doing this with our customers who've been with us for 6 months, but also who've been with us for 12 years, right? And we do it on an annual basis because things change. There is a customer success function that is looking at activation and adoption and ongoing learning and training through our Learning Academy platform, right, which is on demand. So there's that stream as well. And then one of the things that we are introducing now as well is this concept of, we know that internally within an organization, sometimes you need a program manager to drive things.
Yeah.
And somebody who's not distracted with the day-to-day, right?
Yeah.
But who knows kind of digital experience, who knows the tech that you're working with. And That's the other thing that we're introducing, which is the ability to have somebody on retainer to help drive those projects and programs. And because we're a composable DXP, to answer your first question, we're designed to work with third-party systems. So we're also kind of tech agnostic in that sense, because we expect to have to work with and integrate and govern and help make everything work like one solution, regardless of whatever you're using and whatever you think you're going to need to use in 12 months.
And that is definitely it's an increasing realization in the market, which I think everyone has known, but now we kind of acknowledge it, that you're not going to have everything just from me. Like, you will buy stuff from other people. And like, as someone who came from tech and then started working for vendors, it's like, no, they're only going to buy our stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's nice.
That's nice. That's a fairy tale we tell ourselves.
Right. So still so many questions, but on this onboarding and success experience, have you got measurable like uplift of either before and after, or customers that take this service? Like, how quickly do they onboard? How do they get to that aha moment faster? Is their lifetime value higher? Is renewal faster and easier? Does expansion happen? Like, how do you measure the success of that particular program?
Yeah, so I would say everything being driven from those initial buyer insight research to it influencing our roadmap to sharpen our focus to actually delivering on that, helping the sales teams and the account managers convey that value to prospects or customers, getting them onboarded and helping them with their ongoing progress. A number of things, and I look at success in different ways. Absolutely. If you talk about bottom line revenue growth year on year, strong double-digit growth, right? Rolling last 12 months, that's been undeniable. So we've seen that come down from whether it's expansion, renewals. Renewals are really low, single digit, under 5%,
Sorry, the renewal is low, or the churn?
Sorry, the churn rate is really low. Sorry, good point.
Yep.
Revenue growth is double G, as I said. So that's kind of the bottom line. But I think the other drivers of what we're seeing are the qualitative ones, right? So employee NPS has shifted by over 20 points in the last 12 months. Sales team's confidence. We hold ourselves to a minimum of 4 stars in sales enablement ratings in terms of what you knew before about a product and how it helps customers. Do you feel you can confidently convey that now? Customer NPS has moved up by over 30 points in the last 12 months. So apart from the hardcore revenue, speed, experience, and side of things, the cultural change within the organizations and within ours sets ourselves up for this to be a sustainable growth trend, because I think the people driving the business, now customer side and our side, have to feel confident. And I think that's the other qualitative measure that I think is just as important on sustainability.
Definitely, those numbers that you just shared, like that impact is amazing, and the fact that it all came from know your buyer and know your customer, and then like having things aligned, I think is just testament to the power of first party insights. As a bit of a research nerd and advocate for doing fast, meaningful research, what were the really pivotal questions that you asked when you were talking to existing customers and those that maybe went somewhere else or were potential buyers? Like, what really gave you like the top 3 that moved the needle?
I think for us, it was just about whether or not, like, how did they feel that they were progressing with what they were doing, like digital experience wise. Like, if you had to rate yourself, where would you be on that scale and why?
Yep.
That gave us a lot of insight that we could dig into, because we could probe again. Kind of, this is another reason why first party research, to your point, is really good versus outsourcing it per se. You get to dig in deeper because you know what you're looking for personally. So that was one thing, and that gave us those top 3 things. Things are too slow. There's the personal risk. The tech solutions are archaic and rigid or messy. So those are the key things that we said. And then we talked about, where do you think what's our place in your world right now? right? Like, do we even place in your
Yeah.
world?
Don't shy away. Like, ask.
Yeah. And that was the other kind of like, great to tell us what you're looking for and where your barriers are. Are we actually doing anything to make your life easier and better? And there were some clear gaps, like they expected more on certain things. So things like the deep dives and the customer success plans are those things that they said, I'd love to use your product more. I just don't know how, and I can't map the pathway. Um, and the practicality stuff. Just don't sell me a dream. I don't need that. I just need to get my job done today,
Yeah.
right now. So help me with that before you ask me for anything else. So I think those were the key insights that we got, that really triggered us to take practical action and not go too far and become irrelevant, which I think I've been in organizations where we've struggled from that ourselves.
Yeah. I just can't echo enough just how important and impactful having that data is. Like, just blown away by the results you're talking about there, and how it's just spread across the organization. So the ship is going, it's sailing, it's fully fired, it's rocketing along. What's next? And of those things, what could you now only do because you've done this work in the last 24 months?
I want to steal from Jeff Bezos, right? Like, we're not there yet because every day is almost day one again.
Yep, always.
So I'm not arrogant enough to say that things are sailing, right? Because we hope to never be that comfortable because we can't, right? So the great thing about, and I think for any of your audience that are in marketing stroke product marketing, what we've experienced here at Squiz is the fact that insight and research has directly driven investment and a pivot in the product roadmap. And for a tech company, I think anybody that's in a B2B or SaaS type of tech driven company knows that that is hard, right? Like, we actually had to shift not the Titanic is not that, it wasn't that bad, but we had to pivot a really large ship and decide where the investment goes and where did we take investment away from other areas to
Right.
invest in that pivot in that product. And then how did that change the business model, right? This kind of pivots I've been around for a long time. They don't happen very often, right?
No,
Because
and not easily.
yeah, you raise the point that sometimes you do research in a silo and then it gets kept as a PDF or
Yep.
a file somewhere that never gets looked at for another 5 years. So I think if we hadn't done that research and credit given to the leadership, the founder, the CEO, and all my colleagues at the leadership level, when you come in as an outsider and you present research like this that reinforce a lot of the things that we were doing, but also cause us to rethink what we were doing, there's a lot of territorial defensibility that tends to rear its head.
Yes.
This group had
There's sacred
this group
cows, there's
absolutely.
institutional, tribal, don't touch that space, it's
Oh,
mine.
it's my space. I
Yeah.
built this over the years. Like, I say the culture is incredibly humble and humility is a big deal because then we know that we can change. That was the attitude. And I think without that, you don't flow it through a team that has to struggle through a lot of transformation and change, because then that brings out the old days were better because I knew what I was doing.
Yep.
And we had to struggle through a lot of that. And I think if you don't have that level of culture and the acceptance to sacrifice now so that you can all win later, that is not something that would have happened as a result of the research.
Yeah, I think what you've said there, so 2 points really stood out: that to get funding and investment, often it needs to be at the expense of something else. And so,
Yes.
politics inside of businesses is real and hard, like it's unavoidable. But the bit there about, like, we didn't have sacred cows, we didn't have this is my backyard, get off my lawn. really highlights the importance of not just the soft skills, but how culture, like you think in a tech company, it's all about the tech, but
Yeah,
it's not, right? Like culture eats strategy, or in this case,
absolutely.
it fed it, right?
Yeah,
And so that is just, I think we have too much lip service to, oh yeah, like we work together and like it's important and like I'm data informed and I listen, but often that's not the case. So it's amazing to hear that not only is that the case at Squiz, but what you can do when you've got that, like that blows me away, literally.
and I don't want anyone to think that that was easy. Like there was a lot of
No.
humble pie, there was a lot of hard discussions, there was a lot of um, what do I do about this that went on in that exec group. But if you set your mind to how everybody wins and you know what the big things are right now that will get everybody else in that space, that's probably the most powerful thing. And I think, coming back to the research, if it's not an internal navel gazing exercise and actual customers or buyers are telling you this, it becomes a lot harder to refute. But it takes good people and no egos to make that happen.
Well, it certainly sounds like you've got a good team. Like I know Leonie, she's awesome. So
She is, yes.
that's great. Well, look, I have loved this. I've learnt a lot. I've certainly made a couple of notes and I've got some takeaways. Where can people
Same
find
here.
you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Mei Koon. Probably, hopefully, it will be a link from the podcast, etc. And if any of your listeners are keen to connect, just reach out to me. Mention the podcast. And also, we've just released a digital experience trend report where we talk a lot more about how the future is dead and how you need to take the approach that you and I have just discussed. Reach out to me on LinkedIn and I'll make sure that we get a report out to you.
Well, I love the plug. Thank you. And I've had a sneak peek at that report. Definitely worth checking out and highly recommend connecting with Mei. Thank you very much for your time. It's been great.
Thank you so much. This has been fantastic, Andrew.
Fantastic. Love it. You've been listening to the Buy-led Growth Show, where we help you scale without wasting spend.